I think it's the time now to introduce a truly inspiring figure, a young and talented lawyer, and a passionate advocate for human rights. Yes, I am talking about Ms. ستاره محمدي. ستاره is an award-winning human rights advocate and the founder of Australian Hazara Legal Network, an organization dedicated to supporting vulnerable communities and promoting justice. She holds a bachelor's degree in politics from Monash University, a master's degree in politics from the prestigious University of Oxford, and a Juris Doctor from Monash University. Her dedication to social justice, refugee rights, and community empowerment continues to make a significant impact both nationally and internationally. Before we hear more about her incredible journey and work, I kindly ask all of you to give her a very warm welcome. Thank you.
Hello and salam to everyone who's here today. As mentioned, my name is ستاره محمدي, and it's a true honor and a privilege for me to be here and speaking to all of you who, like me, are in a very similar situation in terms of deciding what you want to do with your career and with your journey. And I think it's such an exciting time to be learning and to be hearing about what you can do and the possibilities that is before you. So it's a real privilege for me to share my journey as a Hazara, as a young Hazara woman who have been fortunate to have the opportunities that I've had throughout the last 10, 15 years, and my journey from becoming a refugee to now practicing as a lawyer. So like similarly, many of you, my family and I also came here as Hazaras from Afghanistan. I don't need to explain the journey in terms of persecution that our people have faced over the course of the last century and more. But I've had the opportunity to start my early life in Australia when I was a child. And the fortunate to be able to get an education in terms of being the first women in my family to receive formal education. As a result of the opportunities, I went on to do my first bachelor's in international relations and human rights at Monash University. From a young age, I was always curious and I was optimistic at the same time to understand the politics around the world. Really the politics that change the course and the trajectory of your lives and my life as to why things happened the way they did. And so my interest in politics was there from a very young age, which is why I decided to study at a tertiary level education. And so when I did go to Oxford in 2019 as part of one of two scholars from Australia, again, I was adamant to carry that curiosity in terms of wanting to study politics at a more deeper level at Oxford. And so I did my master's in international relations and Middle East politics, particularly focusing on the relations of the US and China with Afghanistan. When I came back from Oxford, I decided to pursue a Juris Doctor, which is a postgrad law degree. So in order to become a lawyer here in Australia, there are two ways to do that. One is to do an LLB, which is an undergrad law degree. So once you finish your university studies, you can, depending on your ATAR, you can get into a straight law degree. And the other pathway is if you want to study it once you have finished a bachelor's degree. And so that's the pathway I decided to go under. And I was fortunate to be awarded a scholarship again to study a Juris Doctor at Monash, which I finished formally last year, at the beginning of last year. That's a photo of me. The photo at the top here is at one of the famous libraries in the world. It's called the Radcliffe Library in Oxford, at the centre of Oxford. The other photo in the middle is with me and one of my professors who is an American scholar at Oxford, and he taught me immensely about the complexities and the multi-dimensions when it comes to Afghanistan's politics and the US's involvement in that. And the picture on the left is me getting admitted as a lawyer last year. Over the course of the last 18 months, I've been lawyering, I suppose. And so for me, what that has meant is going into the commercial and corporate space. People like you and I, who come from the backgrounds that we come from, we tend to, I think, sometimes limit ourselves to law in the area of migration, for example. And so I wanted to explore the commercial space. I wanted to understand the private sector beyond what we know as lay people. And so I was fortunate to start a graduate program at Russell Kennedy, which is a law firm in the city, a full-service law firm, and I'm currently practicing in defendant insurance, so public liability and personal injury. And in very simple terms, what that means is people who get injured at work, they have a right to claim for compensation under Victorian legislation. And the other pathway is people who get injured in public spaces, so libraries and so forth. They also have a right under legislation to seek compensation, and that's the area I currently work in. And the other area that I'm currently practicing in is family violence in the Frankston Magistrates Court. So I work with a lot of clients, including from our own community, who are either victims of or accused alleged perpetrators of family violence. So that's the other area, which is a very difficult area to be practicing in as a young lawyer. But at the same time, the opportunity to appear before a magistrate and to represent your client, knowing and understanding the complexities that come with each one of our stories, each one of our experiences, is a really rewarding thing for me personally. The photo on the right is of me and my two brothers. So I come from a family of lawyers. There's 4 of us in our family. 2 of my brothers are practicing in family law and family violence at the Victoria Legal Aid. My other brother is also in banking law, and I in the commercial space. I mentioned from a young age I was always curious about the world and the impact of that on communities, on individuals. And so from a very young age, I was driven by a sense of purpose. For me, education was more than just getting qualifications. It was about doing something. It was about leaving an impact. And over the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years, I've done that within my advocacy work. You might not believe, but I was involved in leadership roles from grade 3 when I became school captain. So that leadership ignition, I think, for me began at such a young age. Over the last 10 years or so, I've been a fierce advocate in terms of human rights, in terms of refugee rights. All of us have a good understanding of the Australia's refugee policy on people like ourselves. People who have been stranded on temporary visas for over 10 years, 12 years. So we've been advocating with policymakers, with the United Nations and its agencies around how we can better protect and promote the rights of refugees here in Australia, in Indonesia, and in other parts of the world as well. Importantly, my work over the last recent years have focused on promoting and protecting the rights of Hazaras. For me, having lost my own family member to the tragedy of the Taliban has always driven me with a sense of force, with a sense of drive to do something about the situation. I think being in a position of power and privilege currently, we have a lot that we can do in terms of holding our government, holding our parliamentarians to account in terms of what the role that Australia and other countries can play in terms of the situation of our people, not only here in Australia, but also inside Afghanistan in terms of the ongoing genocide that we have been facing as a community. And so my work has been about raising awareness of that, educating people here in Australia, changing the narrative around why people come here, and that we're not only here to seek better opportunities, to take over Australians' jobs, but we have a reason to be here, and that is the persecution, continued persecution that our people are facing in Afghanistan. And so the role that I and others have played is to educate our parliamentarians. We have worked with very senior ministers, including Richard Marles and Mark Dreyfus and others. And the strategy that we're trying to work on is to get Australia to recognise the systematic nature of killings that our people are facing inside Afghanistan. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that there is general violence, that all people, women, girls, ethnic and religious minorities are under enormous human rights atrocities inside Afghanistan perpetrated by the Taliban. But what distinguishes the experience and the persecution that the Hazaras are facing by virtue of ethnicity, by virtue of religion, and also our liberal and democratic values, that needs to be highlighted. So that takes me to my engagements at the international level. I've had the fortunate to be able to speak about these issues, particularly the situation of the Hazaras, at the UN on a number of occasions. In 2022, when I had the opportunity to speak at a sort of major plenary event, about 7 minutes was dedicated to me about speaking about the genocide of the Hazaras, which was enormous. I think it's the first time in our people's history that we've had the opportunity to thoroughly and in depth talk about the history and the atrocities in the way that they have been committed in detail, and which continues to this day. The photo on the bottom here was from a statement that I delivered at the United Nations back in June 2023. It was about highlighting the distinct nature of violence and persecution that the Hazaras are facing at the hands of the Taliban. I mentioned a few things there, which is a fact, which is the reality that the Taliban are doing. And upon me finishing that statement at the UN, for the next 2 weeks or more, I was attacked left, right and centre, mainly by Pashtun activists, highly educated Pashtuns, including ex-President Ghani's brother on social media, about how dare Hazaras, including young liberal Hazara women, speak about the atrocities that, you know, Pashtuns who have been in positions of power, but also other dominant groups in the country have perpetrated against our community. And to me, I think that was a sign that, you know, myself and others should be more determined than ever to talk about these issues, particularly at the global and international level, and to shed some light into the narrative that have been always spoken about and told from only one angle, which is the dominant groups. I've also been writing about these issues at an op-ed level, including The Guardian and Al Jazeera. I think it's equally important to talk about amongst ourselves about these issues, but more important that we educate the wider public, whether here in Australia, but also globally as well. So these articles, some of which have featured on The Guardian and Al Jazeera. And last year I was fortunate to also publish a peer-reviewed article on the principle of relocation. And put simply, what it means is that when refugee claims are denied or rejected by governments, including Australia, then there is a rule under international refugee law that supports deportation of people back to Afghanistan. And so this paper that myself and Professor Maria Sullivan have written makes the argument that when it comes to claims like that of the Hazaras, the principle of relocation should not apply, because it shouldn't be a blanket rule that applies to everyone. There should be nuances to it, and the argument that we make is that when it comes to the Hazaras, there's a lot of complexities and a lot of dimensions in our stories and our experiences. And so just because someone is fleeing persecution from Mazar-i-Sharif or Bamyan, it does not mean that they can relocate to I don't know, Kandahar or whatever it is. So that's the argument that we're making, is that Australia and other countries should not be deporting Hazara refugees who have had their refugee claims rejected back to Afghanistan whilst the Taliban are in power. And lastly, over the last 5 years or so, there have been huge numbers of young students wanting to study the law. There's a huge interest in young Hazaras wanting to become lawyers, which is really fantastic. And so we've established an organisation called the Australian Hazara Legal Network, which was launched last year. And now we have members of up to 120, I believe. So it's a growing network. I would encourage anyone who's here today who's interested in studying the law to approach myself after in the networking section. And I'd be more than happy to have a chat around the practicalities, logistics, ideas, anything that I can help with in terms of that. But the network is really about giving people opportunities. So we've, over the last year, helped about 10 people get employment at Victoria Legal Aid as well as Russell Kennedy. And we're trying to strengthen our partnerships with law firms and other organisations to assist our students and young lawyers who want to seek opportunities in those law firms. As well as that, we also aim and continue to advocate with policymakers around issues of concern to the Hazaras. So I've mentioned senior parliamentarians like our Deputy Prime Minister, Richard Marles. So that's this photo at the bottom. We met him earlier this year, and he was very keen and interested to learn more about the Hazaras because he's someone who hasn't had a lot of exposure to our community, and for him, a meeting with 15 young liberal professionals was something that was really refreshing. So I've had numerous conversations with him since, and we're about to organise an event in southeast Melbourne to bring him over, to introduce him to the community. So that's another part of our work, is to raise awareness and to strategise with policymakers around how we can better promote our rights. And that's it. Thank you, everyone.
Any questions? Any questions? Let's see.
Any questions from the audience?
Any questions, please? Yes, please. This is how I spend my day.
ستاره, very good presentation. Can I ask a question? As you know that majority of our people arrives in Australia on refugee visas. So can you please tell us that is there any opportunity to get a scholarship? As you said that you have completed your Juris Doctor at Monash and you got a scholarship. So I would be grateful if you could please share that if there is any scholarship for the student, if they can obtain based on their visa surplus, if they hold a humanitarian visa. So that would be great. Thank you.
No worries. That's an excellent question. Thank you, Asmat, for raising that. So I studied at Monash, and I know from my knowledge that Monash does offer scholarship for people who are on temporary status, such as bridging visas. So there's definitely that. In terms of scholarships more broadly, I know since COVID, a lot of the funding has dried up in that area, which is really unfortunate. But I would encourage anyone who's interested in studying on a scholarship, as you should all be, to look into various universities and what scholarship programs they offer. In terms of Monash, if anyone's interested in studying at Monash, I'd be more than happy to have a chat around the scholarships that Monash offers. The scholarship that I got at Monash was a Juris Doctor, so it's a postgrad degree. It's not necessarily a bachelor's degree, but I'm sure there's other scholarships for people on temporary status who don't have a permanent visa to be able to access tertiary education.
We have a question from the back.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. Just a quick question that what will be the future job opportunities with the era in AI? Because I do believe that after 10 years of studies, there will be very few jobs. And the other thing is that there are super specialties in law. So you may have studied in immigration. There are other medical law, mercantile law, and I'm not sure how it will look like for a young person to study several years and there's no job.
Thank you for your question. I do acknowledge the challenges that comes with AI and the complexities, I think, around that in terms of what that means for people's employment and the security around that. I can only speak about the law in relation to AI, and I can certainly say that the role of lawyers, particularly in terms of representation and advocating in court, that is something that AI can never take over, because you need a human to be in court to represent their clients and to do everything that's involved in terms of representing an individual in court. So that certainly is there. In terms of other aspects of the law, for example, when there is writings or communication that needs to be sent, I don't know what that means going forward, but I know that law firms are trying to get access to programs that can do that type of work, which means it will reduce employment opportunities, particularly at a junior level, let's say paralegals and other types of entry-level jobs. But in terms of the broader legal profession, I think it's a long way to go before AI can fully take over the profession in that regard. Any other questions?
Thank you.
I think that's it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Ms. Statara محمدي, for sharing your powerful insights, your inspiring journey, and the important work you're doing for human rights and community justice. We really appreciate you being here today. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me once again in thanking Statara with a warm round of applause.